I used to run a nonprofit like BMX team in like 2012. I think we started it. And then Mike was on, him and his kids were on my team. And I was designing with this company called Turn 3 to make new frames. South Carolina was welding them up. And that got to the point where Mike was machining stuff. I was like putting input and designing for the little guys, covering the cost. And then it was being sold under Turn 3. That turned into, I bought my own machine, and the first product that we made was a front load. I actually got a bunch of them still. And it was just kind of like to see where we're at. And Mike Calculated was just a nonprofit team, so it wasn't even like a real business yet. And Mike was already kind of messing around with anything he designed was just, I think he was going with Von Solid components or something, but it wasn't a company either. It was just, he was like just making products, and other companies were just kind of, checking them out and buying them, like doing, buying the design plus the production. And then that turned into me getting my own machine and trying to get those contracts. And then I was making parts for Tangent, Throwdown, Answer. We stopped designing with Turn 3, but so basically the company's always been Calculated Manufacturing, but the frontward out-facing brand of like whatever products we sold under our company was, we just gave Mike his name because that was his like product line. And it wasn't even the majority of what we were making. So after we started making our own product, we kind of pulled away from making contract work for everybody else. Like we still had good terms with Tangent. We just started, they started bringing stuff in-house, and we helped them like model up their fixture up and all that stuff. And Mike was doing a bunch of trips out there to help design their new frame stays and rear dropouts. And so we kind of just were spread all over the place, and branding's never been a very good spot for us. Like, I'm not really in social media, and Mike was already had it, but it was more just for his career, his machining. And then I guess it was around COVID, Mike just decided not to do the social media thing anymore. So yeah, we're still kind of doing the same thing, designing, making parts. I'm trying to pull away from the selling them so much as like coming out with the new stuff. I guess I can talk about my newest project. From the ground up, we're designing micro to mini. So it's going to be a shorter, like a micro small or nano, some people are calling them. But basically from like 3 to like 8 years old, maybe 7. But we're tightening, we're making our own hub, our own bottom bracket. So we're tightening the Q factor. And then the rest of the components will be, from other companies that is already established standard. But basically this project is, I pulled back from making a lot of the production parts for everybody else and concentrating on making a ground up completes. I'm going to try to do 100 bikes by the end of the year. So I'll be at Grands. I'm just going to show showcase some of our colors and options. And our goal is, our target weight is under 8 pounds stock and a cheaper price. I don't really want to go into that yet, but basically off the shelf complete bike that's competitive in price. And it's got a tight Q factor, and you put in all your measurements, and we're going to just, it's custom to you from the factory. So by pulling away from the normal company stuff, this is, it's freed up my time to make, innovations from the ground up. We're making a new hub, standard, everything. It's going to be, instead of the 110 millimeter spacing, it's going to be the 90 mil, or I think technically it's an 88 mil. And, same thing with the bottom bracket, tightening it. Instead of like trying to compete with all the companies that are already doing, they're adapting adult size bottom brackets with, kid size crank arms and tucking them in as much as you can. There's limitations to the frame clearance and stuff. So we're going to overcome that with a new hub and new bottom bracket design.
So will it be sold as a complete solution, or will it actually have parts and accessories as well?
Well, my initial release, because I've already kind of delved down this, having, enough parts to make sure that you can replace them and stuff. We're going to start with 120 frames, and I'm only going to sell 100. So I'll have replacement frames and, demo frames. But I'm also going to do, we're going to go to China straight off the bat for a hub, plus make our own in-house hub. So there's 2 different levels of hub design, so that our new standard can be replaced with cheaper hubs, and eventually maybe a China complete bike from our new standard. But primarily for this year is it's going to be all made in house. The hub and frame assembly, bottom bracket, and we'll use our traditional components, but they'll just be under the calculated name. And the series, the VSR and the R series is kind of it's not going to be dropped. It's still going to be under the designation for that part. But as we come out with new parts, it's just going to have a series number, or letter. And then there will be replacement parts. So we're trying to change the standard, but we have to start somewhere. So I'm teaming up with like Helium and a couple other companies. And I think they're already going to make something for the interface just so that there's aftermarket parts for that.
So I saw Helium at Grands, and they look like a more of a pro shop kind of setup. So do they focus on the smaller stuff?
Yeah, I've been working with Damon Sprague's for a while. We made products for him in the past, like the dual size crank arms, and we helped develop. But he's also helped us out move our parts primarily on his custom bikes. And he's more, a pro shop. So if you want a bike built specifically for the younger riders, I think he goes all the way up to expert. He kind of stays away from the pro scene, but he's pretty much right now, I'd say, the go-to guy besides maybe George Acosta. But for the little guy stuff, they're both, if you want specifically the little rider in mind, then Damon and George seem to be the premier guys to talk to about that.
So if anyone wants to buy your stuff, they're the first place to stop by?
Yeah, I mean, we're in JD Cycle Supply, so there's bike shops that carry our stuff. We pulled out of Dan's, but Helium's the only place online I think that you can buy them. And if you're a bike shop, you can go to JD Cycle Supply.
So when all the new product comes out, will that be available through them and yourself, or just through them?
We will offer the bike as like on our website, so you can just go through the custom build, and the spare parts will be also provided at that point. But yeah, Helium is probably going to be the first place that you're going to see it. The first place it's going to be sold, and Damon's going to take the first orders.
So what should people expect from the frame? What will it be called?
Haven't really got down the names. It's hard for me to get the branding down. Like, I'm not really on that side of it, but we were going with just calculated racing, just like our brand before, but just we're gonna simple badging. But basically, we're just gonna focus on the smaller size product. It's not, I mean, for the series or whatever, I haven't even thought about that at all. We've been deep in just development. We already got the first prototype out. We already working on the improvements from the dropouts. It's going to have a disc brake from the factory, no cantilevers, so the brake stays will be super thinned out. The seat, kind of going with two options, maybe out of the box, more of like a fender that you don't really sit on. We got some things in the mock-up. It basically just it wouldn't be necessarily a seat, but more of a guard for the top of the tire, the rear tire.
It's interesting you'd go for a disc brake on such a narrow hub. It must have caused a few late nights for you.
Oh yeah, and I think because we're dealing with the lighter weights, we can get away with the thinner spoke. The spokes are actually going to be super tight to make that clearance. But because we got to design the hub from the ground up, most people just take the hub specs off the shelf and expect that spacing. They got to work around those restraints. I went the other route. I started with the disc brake and the dropouts, and then I built a hub that would fit in the middle of it. So I basically getting them tensioned up and built. I think they're going to be a little bit tricky to we're working on how many spoke count at this moment, because I want to get the weight down as much as I can, but I also want it to be strong, in the rear wheel.
So how many sizes of frames do you think you'll come up with?
3. We've settled it down to 3. So basically like what Sal Carrera, our Turn 3 offers, is like a nano, micro, and mini. We're going to go with the same lineup.
And you're going to get Sal building these frames as well?
I have another frame builder, and we actually have 2 other frame builders online. We've dabbled in the prototyping of frames before, so we're going to work with the same crew.
Okay. And what about fork? Are you manufacturing your own fork, or recommending others?
So yeah, we we're probably going to just go with the forks that are out there. It's all standard. That's what's all on the prototypes. I have worked on an aluminum fork, and I'm kind of from the Elf days back, where they made decent aluminum forks. And I like the price point of those. I think to get it to the price point we want, the production is going to need an aluminum fork. We just haven't settled if we're just going to take one of the cheaper off-the-shelf carbon forks that meet the weight standards, or we're going to go with our own fork that we've already modeled up and prototyped.
Well, you have to make your own crank axles for the narrow bottom bracket shell?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be just a square taper, so it'll fit the traditional crank arms, but you'll have to have the smaller bottom bracket, shorter bottom bracket to fit in that shell. I mean, technically you can put a big one in there, but then it defeats the whole purpose. You're going to have a huge Q factor spread wide open.
So will it be a slider style bottom bracket, or are you going to be manufacturing different size, different widths?
At this point, we're just going to do one width.
Yeah.
And it's going to fit the frame. So for those 3 size crank arms, they'll just fit within that pocket. And all the same bottom bracket, same widths. Obviously, I know I got to provide some kind of aftermarket solution to trying to dial it in, besides just changing the crank arms. But we do have multiple crank arms that come in different Q factors from like the Model 92, because we've had 5 iterations of the crank arm since we made it. And I don't really mind going back a couple, because visually the last 3 are similar. It just the spacing and the Q factor is the only difference.
So what kind of colors do you expect they'll be available in the frames?
I haven't really even gone that far. I mean, basically, we're trying to go with anodizing, like we did. If you saw the prototype we did with Alpha in the past, where it was anodized blue, like the satin anodized colors. We've had requests. People like our pink, so I think we're gonna definitely do the pink, the blue. I like the black with like white lettering. So far I know those 3 colors, but I think we're gonna make it so it's very customizable, because we already deal with the anodizer at such a high level, and they have the operation to scale up for us. I think we'll offer almost every color that we have for our components in the same spectrum, because 7000 series frame, they're 7005, and most of our products are 7075, so the colors will come out really similar.
So if somebody orders a frame, for example, and you give them an option to customize the color, would it take long for the turnaround on having it anodized?
I mean, it's added 2 weeks. I mean,
Okay.
that's being very conservative, because I could put a rush on it and get it quicker, and I know how some buyers are that really want them quicker for an added charge. I mean, we'll obviously deal with that. I'm not really getting into the weeds yet, like in the details of how I'm going to fulfill the orders. Really, my goal is to get a few colors, like settle down to probably 4 colors, release them at Grands, and then say, hey, these are going to be available. We have X amount in each size. We can build these right away, or we can add some time for custom colors.
So earlier you were saying you'll still be selling the R Series and the VSR. Will there be development in that space while you're working on all of this?
Just in the regards to what's going to fit to this bike, like the chain tensioner is getting fixed. I mean, we came out with the Mini before. It's going to have a version 2. We have a 2-piece chain tensioner that's going to be for pros that doesn't really match this space. We have seat post clamps, and yeah, so nothing really like out of industry changing type stuff, but little things that just complement our products that we already make.
What size steerer tube would be in these frames?
1 inch.
Okay.
But instead of using like an 1 1/8 integrated taper down, we're actually going to make our own integrated 1 inch from like more like the road bike without the cups. So if they would have made an integrated 1 inch, it would have been like this. So just imagine, like, if you take the threadless 1 inch that was available for road bikes a few years past, you just take those bearings out and put them in the frame, like just to keep the weight down. I know there's concern about the integrating, making it so it's disposable. Like, that's the way of the new frames. But I think it's worth it on the little guys to cut out that weight of the cups and the hassle of pressing them in. A little cleaner look too.
How light do you expect the frame to be?
Well, our goal was under 6 pounds, but the frame alone, I'm don't have those weights on me right now. The goal for complete was under 6 pounds originally. I think we've backed away from that, and just if we get under the 8 pound, the problem is we got to go with too much off the shelf things like chains. As soon as you get in the exotics of the chains and tie hardware and stuff, it kind of blows the budget. So if we can get it under 8 pounds, it's a success for us.
So you were talking about how you had to make a narrower bottom bracket shell and a narrower hub. Is there anything else that's wildly different about this frame?
Basically, when you look at the frame, you'll notice right off the bat that we took advantage of not being able to have to use the cantilever brakes, and so those brake stays will be smaller than anything you've seen on the market. The seat post, if we do keep the seat post, it's going to be very thinned out, custom turned in house. The tubings it's just not off the shelf stuff for normally they'll take Sal will build like a bottom tube and it'll just be off the shelf from the larger bikes. We're actually designing it taper and all to be, for little guys. So we're going to save a lot of weight in the frame and fork right off the bat without sacrificing strength. And then if we do go with this seat guard concept, it's a little bit more intensive. It'll shred the weight because it won't have a seat post tube. It won't have the seat post in the tube for the frame, and it'll just be a guard for the seat. But we won't sacrifice the strength because it'll just be smaller tubing that connects the triangles. It'll be a double triangle design, like a traditional bicycle.
So you're not going for any hydroforming or anything?
No, we're just everything turned or bought tapered off the bat, but they're purposed for other parts of the bicycle. Like we're using a top tube for a bottom tube, but tapered tubing. We're using rear brake stays for a top tube.
And what's the dismount going to be like?
It's basically just, you talking about the dropouts?
Yep.
Yeah, it's just going to be through bolt. The smaller hardware, M6, M5. It's basically a 15 millimeter dropout, 10 millimeter dropout, 3/8, but it'll have a step down washer from 15 to that 10, and then the hardware will just tighten that together, kind of like an answer, like interface mini hub.
So is the brake adapter built into the frame or built into the dropout?
Yeah, it's built into the dropout. It'll be adjustable, and it won't have open dropout, so you won't be able to put a solid axle. It'll have to have like the socket head cap screw that will go into the side into spacers. But that gives it strength so we can thin it out by closing the rear. We've had issues with our universal mount with some cheaper dropouts or some weaker dropouts, is when you put heavy braking on it, it'll actually spread the dropout apart. And we've been able to thin it out by keeping the rear closed, basically.
Okay, cool. What size rotor is it built for?
120 mil, made in house. So we're doing aluminum, but it uses only Magura brakes so far because we can get away with a thicker rotor.
Does Magura make a smaller lever for the kids?
Yeah, they do it. The cool thing about the Magura is you can adjust it. You can adjust it so far down. We have a road bike rear one piston caliper that we've adapted, but we also have off the shelf one piston calipers from Magura. But we kind of have a hybrid thing going on. So for the road, and it's a mountain bike lever with a road caliper.
So will you expect most of your bikes to have 18-inch wheels on them, or would a lot of them be 20-inch wheel?
Yeah, it's all designed for the 20-inch wheel. I mean, I'm trying to make it so that the bigger wheel. I know the 18 it's when you adapt over, you got bottom bracket clearance heights and stuff. So I don't think that we're gonna even offer it as an 18, but I see people wanting it to go there, and we had some feedback of the lower guys need to be 18. But in my experience, I was building the racers on our team, the littlest guys with the 20-inch, also the 451 rim.
What's the step over height like? Is it more traditional or very low?
Very low. That's why the triangles will almost look like a dirt jumper size down. Like if you took a 26-inch dirt jumper for a little guy and you shrink it down, it'll be visually similar. So easy step over. It'll actually drop down way below the tire. So that's why we're kind of going towards this tire guard type thing and just teaching the kids not to sit down so much. They can rest their butt on the tire, on the guard, and it'll support them. But we're not really sure if we're going to go that aggressive yet, because we do have a seat and a seat post design, and that's the prototype. So we might just go with that. We haven't cleared all the bugs out with our new design yet, basically.
Do you expect any of this to lead into manufacturing bigger frames and bigger components again later on?
The problem with that is, everybody's doing it at the pro level. They're bringing it to be able to compete with the carbon manufacturing in the pro size, or even the daylight and the aluminum. I don't think there's any room for margin. Those bikes take a lot to make, and I think I just want to bring that level of manufacturing to the smaller guys. I think most likely we're going to go to carbon micros and minis before we go to break aluminum into the pro scene. I think for the pro side, we'll stick to just our accessories, gears, stems, tensioners, maybe into the hubs. I'm working on upgrading our lathe situation. I just got rid of one of our lathes to actually upgrade to a larger dual spindle that will increase our capabilities for sure.
Do you think you'll be selling more of your own branded, say, carbon products? Would you look at, say, carbon chain rings or handlebars or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. But instead of going to the China right off the bat, I think the traditional approach to this is, I messed with carbon before I even came into the machining part of it. We were doing a micro out of carbon, just hand lay up and molds on plywood and stuff. And I think because I pulled back from this, we've actually already started remodeling the shop, and I'm putting in, I do the vacuum bags, and I'm putting a lot of workspace just for a clean area so that I can do more of the carbon, working on the oven. We're definitely going to go to in-house carbon manufacturing. We've already messed with half a dozen designs, but just nothing that I can justify selling for that price point, because everything's so expensive to make here. It's so intensive. So once I get down a process, because I can make the molds in house, I'll be producing. I can tell you our first product's probably going to be just a seat. It's a monocoque design, but it's going to be pre-preg carbon, all one piece, and it'll be hollow shell, but we machine the molds in house, and then we're going to cook them in here, and we suspect the weight will be low enough, and I can keep the cost down, because I've slowly been working on it for the last 5 years, that I think I can produce enough of them to keep the cost down so it's not ridiculous.
So it must be handy to be able to create your own molds.
Oh yeah, that's usually the limiting factor to all these carbon guys. They're always waiting for guys like me to produce them, and I'm glad I finally spent the time to work on it. In the last year, I'm working for an aerospace company that does, we manufacture for the space race primarily. So I pulled away from the bicycle stuff, but just increased my skill set, because I kind of got bogged down with just the production of the normal parts. And then my son went to college for engineering, so he stopped running the machine shop. So if I come back into this, and I told myself, you know what, I'm going to make it fun again. I'm going to start making new products and think outside the box. I don't really care to fill old orders of products that, that are already designed and very well competed against. Everybody's making a small crank arm now. When we first got into the scene, it was wide open. So instead of competing with them, I'm just going to go to the next product and try to fix those issues that we have with their designs.
Also, having your own machinery, it means that you can move with the market as well. How quickly is it for you to go from, say, prototype to manufacturing?
really, if the machines aren't going, I could. Some of these products, I've come from concept to completion and started a production run within a couple weeks. My thing with production is I have a different approach than a lot of the other companies where they're just making one part or one set of parts per run. I usually fill up my full machine so I can press, go, and I go on, bike rides or whatever for hours at a time, then I come back. Basically, I only got into this so that I can, design new products and make new products, like new designs and all that stuff. So when it comes down to production, laziness is key. Like I want to be on my as much as possible. I don't like, worrying about producing X amount of parts for a certain customer. That's why I stopped doing job shop stuff, because it's so demanding for a little wage. Like nobody gets into machining bicycle parts to make money. Like if you want to make money in machining, you go to aerospace, you go to medical. So this has always been kind of like my hobby, and I kind of took it too serious for a while so to pay the bills. And I'm like, you know what? I'm backing off of that. I'm going to make it fun again. There's plenty of people that want to, make this their career. That's when it kind of took away the joy for me from it. And I think I'm getting it back by being able to be on my bike more, basically. So it's a little life change for me,
So is that your BMX bike, or do you do other cycling?
Yeah, I mean, lately, it's, due to the weather here, it's mostly, I got a Bronson, so like all mountain, but traditionally I go from like downhill and enduro. I started BMX in like 87, but in the 90s, it went in, I'm from Santa Cruz, so here everything kind of went mountain biking, downhill, dual slalom. But I got a place in my heart for my BMX bike. I jump on it. I still go. My boys, ramps in his backyard, all the old guys still messing around. But I mean, I even rode road bikes for a while. I think of myself as a cyclist, so anything with two wheels, even motorcycles. Yeah, I find time to get on it.
When you're developing products, do you take inspiration from those other cycling areas?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah. So that's actually a good point, because I learned a lot about stiffness from racing road bikes, and I never really like pictured like the design cues, because they get away with tensioning stuff up by just orienting the strands with a carbon. And I've broken enough bikes to realize, oh, like, why is this carbon bike different than this carbon bike? And then you start realizing the design actually does stiffen up that rear triangle. And I went from like I was a traditionalist. I like chromoly frames when racing BMX, because I got used to that like whip that you can preload the alloy a little bit, and then going from that to like a stiff aluminum or a carbon. I'm now realizing what makes that happen, from like looking in the frame building side of it, and when I'm on a mountain bike, a hard toe climbing a mountain, or something soft and smushy. So yeah, I mean, I definitely take, and just visual. Like, I mean, I like tougher looking bikes. I think I still like the 90s look. I mean, I'm kind of mid school, but I still like the burly fork. The big crown. I know it's not the coolest thing right now, but yeah, I like, all my inspiration comes from riding other bikes, for sure.
Have you seen anything recently in the say road cycling or mountain biking that's made you think, well, how come we don't apply this technology to BMX?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I'm not sure. It's like we've had this argument here, like with Mike and stuff, about like the cantilever brakes. I mean, that's good enough for a long time. I was like, it's good enough. Flat pedals, cantilever brakes, but I think we were doing the same thing back with the quill stem before the, threadless came out. Or every time there's a next step, you're like, I kind of resist. Those are what the roadies are doing, or those are what the mountain bikers are doing. Like, that's like goes against traditional BMX. I get that way sometimes, but I haven't really felt like there's nothing's drastically changed in those industries. Like, until they start coming out with, some crazy, like, I think they've even backed up and become more conservative. Like, there's no crazy magnesium parts coming out anymore. Like, crank arm wise, everything's kind of stagnant. I think the only place that's really lacking is the little guy stuff, bringing those better measurements, the smaller, tighter bottom bracket, the better materials, the carbon. I think it's only really lacking in the little guys. I think the pro size bikes are getting everything that, what I've noticed. I haven't noticed any breakthroughs in the road bike and mountain bike scene, except for maybe the braking, and that's just getting light from the road bike. And obviously I'm taking those cues. I can't really think of anything. E-bikes, but basically you're making like the stasis thing, right? You're basically just motorizing your bike.
Yeah.
Which I'm cool with. I'm whatever. If it makes you go faster and it's funner, and like as if I'm out of shape, I'd rather have a motor than not a motor, but I also enjoy pedaling. So I'm on both sides of that one too. Like I can see both arguments, but I think it's just whatever feeds the sport in general is cool with me. Like if you got stasis guys and all these batteries coming into the scene and little kids are stoked about getting on the track, the purists will come out, and if not, they'll move on to motocross, which I'm also a big support. I think that a sport needs to grow. So wherever it goes, getting kids on two wheels is the goal, right? To me. So even if they end up on the track and doing, velocross and stuff like that, then it's a win for me.
We're probably taking up more time of yours than I expected, but just one last question. What would be the youngest rider you would expect to see on one of your new bikes when they come out?
Realistically, with a 20-inch wheel, I think older 3-year-olds, more likely a 4-year-old, would be on the bike. I do realize that most 3-year-olds probably need an 18-inch, but at that point, they don't need a bike that's as expensive as ours either.
And what length cranks will be available for them?
All the way down to 90 millimeter, 5 millimeter increments.
Oh, okay, cool. I think that's about all I've got for you this time, Casey. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions once everything gets released and we start seeing pictures of everything. So maybe we can catch up with you a bit further down the track.
Yeah, sounds good, man. I'm deep in it. I'm actually willing to put my face out there now. I think but
you've got no one to hide behind anymore.
Yeah, I thought he would just take care of all the PR for me and it'd just be done. Now that I see how things work, I should have probably done this a long time ago.
All right. Thanks very much, Casey. We'll talk to you soon.
Oh, yeah. Talk to you later. Have a good one, Shane.
You too.